All that kind of stuff. I do my job. How's that?
Thank you.
You should go there.
This back? Or you want to?
Okay, sure. That's okay. I have it. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Imam Mahdi Centre. We are really and truly honored to have Honorable Mccallum here in our center. It is a great pleasure for me to be the host of this evening, and thank you very much, Your Honor. And it is very creating a new hope among our Iranian community that we are not secluded from the main community and the main body of the Canadian society, and we are so happy because most of these people that are sitting here and they are very active member of Canadian, they're proud to be Canadian, and we hope that we can continue this relation, and hopefully we can see more positive attitude toward the Iranian community from the liberal parties, and we're sure that's going to happen because, as I mentioned before, I can assure you that I don't want to say 100%, but close to that, Iranian community are liberal supporters and they're supporting the liberal party at least after the experience that we had during the one decade. So, please, thank you and welcome to our center. Please.
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum. Pleasure to be with you this evening. It really is a real pleasure. I was recently at an Iranian Haruz event. It isn't yet, but they were celebrating earlier. So I could say Haruz Mubarak in advance to everybody. And of course, as you just said, we pride ourselves on our openness to all religions, to all groups, to the diversity of Canada, which we treasure. And you mentioned this is an intellectual place where there are a lot of people with degrees. I used to be a professor, so I like that. And you had trouble bringing people here, experts to speak, because of getting visas. Well, as I said, this doesn't necessarily change overnight. We as a government are 100% open to people coming from everywhere to share their knowledge, to debate issues, and we will do everything we can to expedite it. But, you know, it's a big department, and attitudes developed over a decade don't necessarily change overnight from one color to another. So we are definitely working on this, and if you have problems in this area, you should talk to your member of parliament, and we could try to help, but I'm certainly hopeful that things will go more smoothly. Now, I don't want to talk too long because we're going to go over to the synagogue, I believe, in a little while, and I don't want to repeat here everything I will say over there, but let me just say that well, let me leave apart the Jewish-Muslim thing till I get over that. Let me just describe a little bit what we've been doing. And look, I think the main thing that we are doing that got them, at least got the most attention, is that we made a decision to bring over from the worst civil war in decades, the worst refugee crisis in decades, a crisis that is causing convulsions in Europe and might even be an existential threat to the European Union. You just read the news every day, listen to the television, and we made the decision to bring over from those places, basically from Lebanon and Jordan and Turkey, 25,000 people who were in the middle of the worst civil war, to bring them over to Canada, welcome them here, and help them in every way we can to become Canadians. So that's what we did. And the more time goes by, the more I am convinced that we did the right thing. I'm convinced by going there and seeing the conditions in which these people were living. I'm convinced by seeing them on their arrival in Canada. I'm convinced by seeing them at different airports, Montreal, Toronto, Amman, that the smiles on their faces, I think, thank goodness, I think the majority of Canadians also agrees that it was right to welcome these refugees. And what we did was we wanted to choose the most vulnerable. There are two kinds of refugees, privately sponsored and government assisted. And the privately sponsored come with a private sponsor, and that's what you're contemplating doing. And we'll talk about that later. But what we were doing was committing to bring government-assisted refugees, 25,000 of them, over here as soon as we could. And we chose the most vulnerable from lists provided to us by the United Nations. And they chose people who were deemed by the United Nations to be vulnerable. We chose from that list. And I think if you look at the demographics of the people that we chose, they certainly are vulnerable. And I'll just describe. Most of them speak not a word of English or French. Most of them are not like the people you describe here. Most of them don't have very much education at all. Some of them even are illiterate in Arabic, I'm told. Most of them have many, many, many children. And I would say most of them had never been on an airplane before until they came here. So they are in need of our help. And they are vulnerable. And there's two sides of that coin. We're doing the right thing by bringing vulnerable people, but it's more of a challenge to integrate and welcome people with little education and little language skills and so on. We will do it. We've done it in previous waves of refugees. But I'm just telling you that because you should be aware of the kinds of people who are coming into our midst as a result of our determination to go after the truly most vulnerable. And another thing I might say to you is that the United Nations approach is you choose the most vulnerable people, irrespective of religion. We don't mind if they're Muslim, if they're Christian, or whatever they are. We choose vulnerable people. We don't care what their religion is. Now, most of the ones we chose are Muslim, because most of the people in that region are Muslim. But we didn't go out to seek Muslims or Christians or whatever. We chose from the list the United Nations provided us of the most vulnerable people. And it just happened that in this group, in this part of the world, most of them were Muslims. And not all. And the privately sponsored refugees is more of a mixture. Now, I don't want to talk too long. If you have questions, that would be great, but I have a flight to catch tonight to Ottawa, so I can't leave later than 8:10. So I'll just say one other thing, that when we have our discussion, I'd be very happy to talk to you or answer your questions about other aspects of immigration, because immigration is more than just refugees. Refugees are an important part. In fact, my title has changed, thanks to the Prime Minister, to add the word refugees. I'm the Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship. And that's something new, and that signals Justin Trudeau's belief that refugees are a really important part of what we do. But, you know, the other things we've been doing, we've restored health care for refugees. We've determined that a Canadian is a Canadian is a Canadian. We don't have two classes of Canadians, and therefore we will no longer revoke people's citizenship for crimes committed. That's changed. And a big, big, big challenge I have, and it's probably my top priority, is that the department right now is, I can say, a mess, because the processing times for newcomers have gone through the roof over the last decade. And for example, it typically takes 2 years to be for a husband and wife and small children to be reunited. I think that's unacceptable, especially when you look at countries like England, United States, Australia, which take closer to 6 months. So a big, big, big part of my job is to work very hard in using various methods to improve those times as soon as possible. But I don't have to tell you that that's not going to happen overnight. It will take money, it will take major work, but we will certainly do it. That was one of our election commitments. So let me leave it at that. I think we might have a few minutes, perhaps in your hands, and then we are going over to the other place.
How do you get information on the refugees where we're able to get them employment?
To get jobs?
Yeah, I'm able to provide jobs for newcomers because our work does not require very well communicated in English or written.
Well,
So
if
how
you
do we get access to these people coming looking for jobs and we can help them?
Okay, this is what I'll talk about in more detail over there. But the general issue is that if you're talking about government-assisted refugees, we pay for them for the first year, we find them housing, we give them a modest income for a year, and we help them find jobs. We're not responsible for finding them jobs, but we help to find them jobs. In the case of privately sponsored refugees, you have to raise, I would say, around $50,000 to support a family for a period of 1 year. And you use that money to provide housing, to provide language training with the help of the government, and you help them find jobs. You won't necessarily be able to guarantee them jobs, just as we cannot, but you help them make applications, you tell people that they're here, you try to help them find work that they would be suited for.
My question is, how can I be a help for them? People coming to Canada?
Well, he's offering jobs. Oh, you're offering jobs. Sorry, I misunderstood you.
Yeah, explain. He is Mr. Abbas. He is a successful businessman in Toronto. He is offering about 50 jobs for the refugees. That's why he is asking.
You know, we employ about 700 people.
How we can give the...
We have 3 factory jobs for Toronto.
Okay.
So we're looking
My
for,
apologies
no
for
problem.
missing the point.
No, I'm looking for, if there's people who are looking for a job required or get them to start to get Canadian experience, we are willing to help. So from my point of view, how do I help these people? Where do I contact?
I think probably what you do is you go to one of the local organizations that is receiving the refugees and then indicate this and they will send people to you. But I also suggest you give your name and coordinates to Lisa over there. And we might also be able to provide some guidance. But the general point is that there are various organizations. A lot of it's at the local level. It's not from my office in Ottawa. It's the local settlement organizations. And I have some addresses of them to help you find refugees to sponsor if that's what you wish. And so I will give that when we go over there. And Lisa can also provide some further information.
If you don't mind, yes, actually, I do apologize. Dr. Trovin is the person who is charged of organizing this event between here and Senegal. So I'm not sure. Do you want to say something or you want to talk over here?
I just want to mention that we don't have to do too much time over there. If you don't mind, and just very briefly talk about our activities around
Eating your pastries.
around that project. We plan to sponsor 4 families.
4.
Yes. And not only that, we are supporting our government assisted refugees. So far, we've been working with Friends of Syria. We donated furniture, we donated clothing. We supply volunteers, so many volunteers, about 20 volunteers went to their facilities twice to sort the clothing, shoes, pack them, ship them to Lebanon. We also, actually this morning, I myself delivered 40 toiletry packages to those guards who are moving to their apartments in this week. So, in general, not only we are bringing refugees here, we are also supporting guards. So as he mentioned, so far we found 4 jobs for them. Although these are not our refugees, because our refugees we haven't got anything. In the early stages of fundraising, and but in general, our community, the ladies especially, they are very active in offering finding places for them, because one of the challenges with GTA, because of the housing prices, it's not easy for them to find affordable.
Well, look, that's much more than I realized. I thought you were talking about one family. 4 families, that's 4 times more. So thank you.
Yeah, we started with actually 1 or 2 with our neighbors. So although it's 2, but we can't that as 1, but it's half.
Well, that's wonderful to hear, and all that other help too, so thank you all very much. It's really important that you're doing all this. And the good news is people across the whole country are stepping forward. Now, maybe Muslims a little more than others because they're mainly Muslim people, but others too, well, the Jewish people over there are wanting to help the Sikh community, many, many different communities across the country, from little children making welcoming signs to Canadian National giving $5 million and everything in between. People are really coming up to support this. So you're a big part of that support. So I thank you all very much for all that you've done and all that you're planning to do more. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks everybody. I forgot to mention that we have Sergeant Balchan here. Sergeant Balchan is part of the Diversity and Cultural Department in York Region, and he has a very close relationship with the minorities and communities, and it's amazing regarding the awareness and teaching kids and children. And really thank you very much. And several issues he helped us. He has in plan to get closer to our younger kids, and it's very fortunate to have these kind of people closer to our community and closer to our center. Okay,
I've met Sergeant Balchan many times, and I think he does a great job.
Absolutely.
In fact, the whole York Regional Police, I think, he does a great job.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.